Things are gonna get crazy!
Most everyone's mad here.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. How are you all doing, everybody? I hope you all had a nice week, had a very relaxing weekend, and just an all-around good time so far. I know I definitely have. And with this episode, oh boy, do I have something very special for you all. Not only do we have some very interesting animation topics that we are going to go and talk about, some new animation news, in fact, that have been pretty crazy so far and very fascinating to go and look into, but also I actually have a special guest with me. Oh my God, it's been a while since I've actually heard that. I kind of forgot what that was. Yes, it is a new fish. So thank you very much, TK, for the subscription right there. Wow, like I was thinking, it was like, what is that noise? Oh yes, it's a subscription. But anyways, folks, yes, I actually have a special guest with me, and this is someone whom I am excited to go and talk to. Who I have here is actually a professional film critic. No, not just any, oh, wow, another new fish. Thank you, Matt Ralph. Yes, but this person is actually a professional film critic, not just any regular reviewer like me, someone who actually goes into press screenings and actually works as a film critic, as well as a writer for WatchMojo. And also, we're going to be talking about this later, but is now an author. So please welcome everybody to AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast, Nick Spake. Nick Spake. Yes, Nick, how are you doing, dude?
Hey, I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Hey, no problem, no problem. Have things been going well with you?
I've been doing well. Like you said, I just had the book published, and it's called Bright and Shiny, A History of Animation at Award Shows, Volume 1. That's right, it's just Volume 1. We still got Volume 2 coming out, but just Volume 1 alone is already covering a lot of animation history at award shows.
Oh, yes, and trust me, we're going to really get into that because I got some questions that I want to go and ask you. So, from there, Nick, I would like to go and ask you, are you ready for today's episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast?
Hey, I've never been more ready for anything.
Awesome. And by the way, before I continue, there are a few honorable mentions that I want to go and mention, considering there have been some people who did pass away recently, including George Foreman and the head writer of Courage the Cowardly Dog, David Stephen Cohen. So, as well as an individual who is known as the puppet nerd, Adam Krutinger. So may they all rest in peace. And a lot of these people, well, some of them I'm actually very familiar with, especially with David. As a Courage the Cowardly Dog fan, it is a bit tragic to hear that man has passed away, especially when he has worked on not just Courage, but like plenty of other very amazing and fun shows. You've heard about that news?
Yeah, it really took me by surprise, especially him and George Foreman. And weirdly enough, I know George Foreman best from his appearance on King of the Hill, so also animation news related. But he really had a great product in the George Foreman grill.
Oh yeah, definitely. If it's not for his boxing, it's for his grills that he is known for. And we're not talking about teeth here. But yes, may they all rest in peace and may their legacy live on. But it is great to see that everybody is prepared. And so with that said, it is now time we shall go and get things started. And with our first story, or this first special little thing that we're going to do here, we are going to go and talk about your book. Now, you've given us a little bit of an introduction of the book, specifically right over here, Bright and Shiny, A History of Animation at Award Shows, Volume 1, which wasn't that long ago that it was published, that you could go, and I'll say it right now, that you could find it on the website of the publisher Bear Manor Media, as well as you could find it on Amazon. But First and foremost, though, Nick, I would like to ask you, can you go and summarize a little bit more about what your book is about? Like, what is Bright and Shiny?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the name it comes from something that Shirley Temple told Walt Disney when she unveiled his special Oscar for Snow White. When she said, "Isn't it bright and shiny? Aren't you proud of it, Mr. Disney?" I thought that would be a good title to basically summarize what the book is about. I also thought about calling it the Kids Table, just because animation is sometimes treated like it's at the kids' table, but I decided to go with something more positive, and I thought that bright and shiny really encapsulated that. And even though the line comes from the Oscars, the book isn't just about animation at the Oscars, even though that's a big part. It's also just as much about animation at the Emmy Awards, going all the way back to when Hanna-Barbera broke out there and paved the way for other animated shows. And it's also really about the Annie Awards and how that first started with June Foray in the 1970s. So it covers those three in particular, but pretty much all award shows are fair game to analyze how animation is represented. And since this is just volume one, it covers everything from the first Oscar that Walt Disney ever won for Flowers and Trees in the Best Animated Short category, all the way to the early 90s when we saw Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, and Lion King break out at award shows. And one of them even went all the way and got a Best Picture nomination.
All right, that is interesting. And already, like, just from the premise alone, it got me hooked. Now, I would like to go and ask you in regards to your inspiration. What is it that made you decide that you're going to go and write a book specifically about animation during award shows? And not to mention, well, first and foremost, this is your first time writing a book, right?
Yeah, the first time that I've ever had one published, I've been, growing up, I would always just kind of write stuff on the sideline. I wasn't serious about getting it published or anything like that. But Bright and Shiny, it's the first nonfiction thing I started writing. I thought to myself, this might actually be publishable. And and it turned out it was. But in terms of what inspired me to write the book, animation and award shows have always been two of my main passions. So it just kind of made sense to combine them into one thing, especially since you see a lot of books about the Oscars and sometimes even the Emmys, but I noticed that there wasn't one for the Annie Awards, and even when books do cover the Oscars and Emmys, animation is usually a footnote at most, and you never really get a deep dive into those races. And I guess I decided to write this around the same time that Into the Spider-Verse came out, and I was thinking to myself, this is a great film. If it gets nominated for Best Animated Feature, it'll probably win, which it did. But then I thought to myself, but it's not going to get nominated for Best Picture, even though it really should. And I thought to myself, why haven't there been more animated films nominated for Best Picture? So I decided to do a deep dive into that. And while I was also analyzing animated features, I thought, well, why not also talk about animated shorts? Why not talk about TV shows? Why not talk about, as much about, animation history at all award shows as possible? And with any luck, this book will help animation start to get its due, which won't just end with, another animated film getting nominated for Best Animated Feature, Best Picture, but hey, it would be nice to actually see a lot of the animation awards presented on the main primetime Emmy telecast as opposed to just being at the Creative Arts ceremony, and also bring more attention to the Annie Awards, because even though us in the animation industry know about the Annies and follow that, the average person on the street might not know it, and hopefully that'll bring more attention to them too.
Yeah, that is fascinating. It is interesting. And you did bring up something interesting, like since you're also covering the Emmys, just like a quick little question. Considering that recently now they pretty much made a new version of the Emmys, specifically looking into the children and families. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I get more of that in the later volumes of the book, but, at first I was kind of apprehensive because it's not impossible for a show directed at a family audience or a kid audience to actually win the Primetime Emmy. One example is Over the Garden Wall, which was over 10 years ago now, but as I interviewed a lot of people doing this book, I talked to people like Rebecca Sugar, for example, who never won an Emmy for Steven Universe, which is kind of baffling, but she would often lose to shows that were more directly targeted at an adult audience, like Robot Chicken. And, occasionally she would lose to also Adventure Time, which she worked on. There you go, Adventure Time, that's another show that's aimed at a more family-friendly audience, but managed to win a major Emmy award at the primetime show. But then you look at other shows like Phineas and Ferb, Gravity Falls, which got individual achievement Emmys, but not in the top categories. And I can't help but wonder, if the Children's and Family Emmys existed back then, would those shows have won Emmys? So if it is going to bring more attention to shows like that, I'm all for it, especially since it's already brought more attention to shows that are really deserving of Emmys, like Hilda. And, it's great to see, a lot of talents who would also go overlooked sometimes at the Primetime Awards, like Eric Baza. He's already won 4 Emmys now, thanks to the Children's and Family Awards, 4 or 3. I'm not entirely sure which, but hey, he deserves all the awards he can get, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the dude's an incredible voice actor. But that does bring up another question that I do have, because that's also another fascinating aspect about your book, is the fact that you went and asked but almost 200 big name personalities in the animation world. In fact, if I go into the website of Bear Manor Media, it even states here that you have done interviews with people such as Jerry Beck, Don Bluth, Brenda Chapman, Ruth Clampett, Don Hahn, Emily Hubley, Alan Menken, John Musker, Floyd Norman, Stephen Schwartz, and nearly 200 more industry professionals. Now, how was that journey of going into all of these interviews, of trying to contact these people and asking them about the awards and stuff like that? And as well, like, one of the people you did mention was Rebecca Sugar. Can you tell us, like, how was that whole process of interviewing all these people for your book?
It was surreal, to say the least. When I started writing, I thought, I'll just maybe once I get this book to a decent place, I'll reach out to maybe some animation historians, maybe even some talent. But, a lot of people probably aren't going to be interested in talking to me. But the first person I managed to get in touch with was Nancy Beeman, who's a legendary Disney animator who's worked on films like A Goofy Movie. And she was actually very helpful, and she's also an Academy member. And she gave me some great answers. And I thought, well, if I can get in touch with Nancy Beeman, maybe I can also reach out to some other people. So I started just looking at, who's on Facebook. And that was one way that I managed to get in touch with people. I also looked on Rocket Reach, where you can get someone's email if they're on LinkedIn, especially. And I was surprised to find just how many people were interested in, doing it. And sometimes we would just do it over email. Other times we do it over the phone. And it probably also helped that I started looking for people to interview when the pandemic hit. So not many as people were working, and more people were open. And I was just surprised by just some of the people I was able to get. And I wasn't able to get everyone who I tried reaching out to. I actually tried reaching out to Jeffrey Katzenberg, and his people got back saying, nah, we're not interested. I'm like, okay, I kind of figured that much. But, it was really surreal when I got on a Zoom call with Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz at the same time. And I thought to myself, whoa, is this really happening right now? Are they actually agreeing to do this? Because, So, yeah, it was really bizarre, but at the same time, it goes to show that if you're interested in, writing a book like this, or you're just doing a book that requires a lot of research, don't hesitate to reach out to people who can help you out, because they just might be interested.
Wow. Like, Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz at the same time. That's like unfathomable, even for someone like me.
Yeah.
Do you remember, like, what would be your most, like, the interview that really stood out to you, or like what is, like, well, as I said, the most memorable interview? Like, was it the Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz one, or was it another one?
That was definitely memorable, and the reason they were both able to do it together is because at the time they were both working on Disenchanted, so they were just kind of together. And I had reached out to Stephen Schwartz, and his people said, oh, we see that you haven't talked to Alan Menken either. They're kind of working together now. Would you want to do them both? I'm all like, yes, of course. So, yeah, that's definitely in the top tier, but one of my personal favorites was probably Floyd Norman, and part of that's just because I think he's been around probably the longest of all the people that I interviewed. I'm not 100% sure about that, but he is the only one who probably knew Walt Disney personally and was able to talk about Mary Poppins, and he actually said some really, inspiring words about, award shows, where a lot of it is admittedly, superficial. There are more important things than winning, bright and gold statues, and the Oscars and Emmys aren't always a proper representation of art's worth. But he did say that when you're at the red carpet and you're surrounded by all these other people, you think to yourself, maybe I have accomplished something in my life, and it is a meaningful experience, and that's one of the reasons why I want to see animation represented, because even though it's not the end of the world if you don't win an Oscar, the representation that it brings to animation does matter.
Very wise words. Very nice. Now, since you finally got your book to go and be published, what would you say is the biggest challenge of making Bright and Shiny? Is it researching? Is it something that's in the book? Or would you say it's the process of turning it into a book, like either editing or to find a publisher for it? What would you say was the biggest challenge of the whole process when creating this book?
Yeah, well, getting in contact with some people was definitely a challenge, but I actually think the hardest part was actually in a particular section. Like, some stuff has been well covered over the years, like the Academy Awards at the Oscars, but the Annies, like I said, hasn't been heavily covered outside of some articles that have been written by historians like Michael Mallory and Charles Solomon. So I kind of had to do a deep dive well beyond, like, websites like Wikipedia, which, doesn't have a lot of very helpful information about the Annies. As a matter of fact, some of the stuff you read on Wikipedia about the Annies is like dead wrong. But I managed to find a lot of like old like newspaper clippings that go all the way back to the 70s, providing more detail about specific Annie ceremonies. And I actually looked out and went on eBay and I found some old Annie programs like this one from 1974, which actually has, like it's more like a yearbook where June Foray actually talks about that particular award show, that particular night. So that provided a lot of great insight, but it wasn't easy finding a lot of these research materials. And another thing that was hard was, it's a little confusing, but at the daytime Emmys, now the Children's Family Emmys, they don't list what episode is submitted for like Emmy consideration like they do at the primetime Emmys. So one of the things I tried to do was figure out what a lot of these shows like Animaniacs like submitted, and I get more into that in like volume 2, but it wasn't easy like finding out what some of these shows submitted for Emmy consideration, but a lot of people I spoke to actually did remember what episodes were submitted, so I worked that in there as well. So basically the research was probably the hardest part of it, which, goes without, which I think you might expect, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Like that's an entire process in itself. Like trust me, like even like for my videos, I understand like how it is a challenge trying to find the right information, make sure it is factual in the first place, and then like turn it into like a transcript where you could put it either onto your book or my videos or stuff like that. So I completely get it. So I think it is safe to say that you're pretty like with your book, you're pretty much an expert on the subject right now. So I would like to know more in terms of your knowledge, but especially now, maybe this will be something that you're going to cover on volume 2. But what I am curious to know about is how do you feel about how animation is currently treated right now in award shows, and not necessarily just with the Oscars, but also with all of them, with the Emmys, the Golden Globes, the Critics' Choice, the BAFTAs, the Annies, like, and all that stuff. How do you feel like, how is animation right now in award shows?
Well, in a way, it kind of feels like we've reverted to the status quo after movies like Up and Toy Story 3, made progress 15 years ago. And even going back further, Family Guy broke through at the Emmys in the comedy series category, but it was never able to break back in. And even shows that have tried submitting in the comedy series category, like Archer, were never able to get nominated there. So it kind of goes to show that there is still very much a divide between animation and live action. And a lot of the times people just view the animation category as the consolation prize because at the Emmys, animated shows like BoJack Horseman or The Simpsons, they can submit for like writing now, but we've never seen one, nominated there, even though they have some of the best writing going on right now. And at the Oscars, it feels like even in a lot of categories where animation used to be recognized, like song, original score, sound, a lot of movies get overlooked. I mean, at one point we all thought movies like Pinocchio, Across the Spider-Verse, Boy and Heron could all get recognized in other categories, but they all only got into animated feature categories. But you look at this year, movies like The Wild Robot and Flow are breaking into places that are beyond Best Animated Feature, not just at the Oscars, but also the Golden Globes. And Flow even won the Indie Spirit Award, moving on on its way to winning the Oscar. And based on the way some people talked about Flow, just like at awards parties that I heard about, they were really passionate about that film. And I wondered to myself, if Flow had broken out just a little earlier in the award season, just maybe it also could have been in the Best Picture nomination. Clearly, getting nominated for animated feature and international were huge wins, and those were the aims. But I do feel like, the more people who watch Flow, the more they say it's their favorite movie of the year. So who knows? So I do think that, there is definitely respect for animation growing, but it can feel like we're just moving baby steps. But like Guillermo del Toro says, animation is ready for the next step, and I think more and more people are recognizing that, slowly but surely.
All right. Now, what I also want to know is, and this does lead to my next question, since you have mentioned it a few times during this entire interview, but it is regarding when we will actually see that moment when an animated feature can once again be nominated for Best Picture. Now, at this point, it's been 14 years now since the last time it was Toy Story 3 that was a major competitor, but we haven't seen anyone that was as prominent since. When do you think there will be a time that we are going to see another animated feature become a big competitor during the award season and get nominated for either Best Picture or Best Series in something like the Annies? Or if you do think so, when do you think that time would be?
Well, it's hard to say when exactly, but I do think it will happen eventually. It'll require either a studio or director from animation to really have a lot of momentum, in the background. Because you look at the films that have been nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, Beauty and the Beast was coming off the momentum of Roger Rabbit and Little Mermaid, which I think really climaxed with Beauty and the Beast. With Pixar, they had Ratatouille, Wall-E, and then that led to Up and Toy Story 3. So that also paved the way. So who knows, what could happen. Maybe if Beyond the Spider-Verse really hits it out of the park, maybe that gets in. Maybe if Guillermo del Toro, has another animated hit up his sleeve, that could get in. And I do think that the fact that Flow got nominated for Best International Feature this year goes to show that, they are branching out. And speaking of international films, this year alone, we saw 2 international films in Best Picture, I'm Still Here, Which One? And Emilia Perez, the internet's favorite movie, of course. And in the past, it was very rare that 2 international films would get into Best Picture, but the Academy is growing more international, so if there are other countries out there who do see animation as more than just kids stuff, then we could potentially see an animated feature get nominated for Best Picture. Who knows, maybe we could even see 2, but I guess let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I do think it will happen eventually. I feel like it kind of has to.
Hey, that day has to come. It's it's that wall you got to keep breaking, and hopefully we'll see it break, and then there's a major animated film that can be a true competitor. Now, I gotta say though, I really do admire what you have done with your book with Bright and Shiny, and as someone who is very much interested in animation history, I even thought to myself, if one day, after doing all these videos, that maybe I could go and write a book about animation history as well. So from there, I would like to know, what advice would you go and give to people who would want to go and follow your path, that they want to go and publish their own book as well? What advice would you want to go and give?
Well, for starters, I say, yeah, I think that you can definitely pull off writing a book, seeing what you've already accomplished. But in terms of advice, something that my college screenwriting professor always told my class was that writing is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And that's a good motto to live by, because you can have an idea, but unless you're fully committed to seeing it to the end, then, it's never going to become a reality. And you can't just commit to the work. You also have to commit to the research, the fact-checking, the writing, and especially the rewriting. I mean, with this book alone, I must have rewritten the first chapter over and over again just to try to get the tone right. And as I interviewed more people, it kind of changed my perspective on a few things. So I went back and changed that over and over again before I finally got it to an acceptable place. And also, like I said before, chances are the more people you talk to, the more you're going to learn. So, don't go in with the mentality that you already know everything, because chances are you don't. And even when you have written the book, chances are there's still going to be a lot for you to learn. And I feel like I still have a lot to learn even after writing the book.
All right. Yeah. I mean, it sounds a lot with like what well, the scale of the project feels like it's so much bigger than like whatever videos I would go and make. So, I guess it's just like for me, I feel like I would have to anticipate myself like, all right, I'm going to go and write a book, but that's like a huge like statement to go and make. And I could imagine like when you made that decision, like, would that be like a major statement? Like you say, I'm going to write a book, and that's like, like, were you aware of the big journey that you were going into?
I honestly had no idea, because at first I wasn't even sure it was something I was seriously going to consider getting published. And I told myself, well, animation, since it doesn't get very well represented at award shows, it'll probably be a short book. And whenever I tell people about this project, they always say, well, that's got to be a short book, right? I'm like, actually, it wound up being more than one volume, because there's a lot of animation history to cover. And part of that's because the book doesn't just cover movies and shows that got nominated for awards and won, but also a lot of movies and shows that really should have been nominated. Like, just to give you one example, What's Opera Doc was submitted for Oscar consideration, but it shockingly wasn't nominated. And that's just one of the many, classics that didn't get its due. And that book is also kind of about that too, just shining a spotlight on what deserved to be nominated and what really should have won also.
Now I do have one more question that I have to ask, and I mean, it's pretty much like mandatory that I need to ask. Volume 2, when?
Yeah, well, the good news is that Volume 2, it's written, it just needs to be polished and formatted with my publisher, and it took us a while to format this like first volume, but since it is like written, it should come out sooner than later. And if you want to follow progress on it, I'm also launching a website called Cartoon Contender, which will provide updates on the book and also more timely articles about, animation and award shows. So if you want to learn more there, you can follow me at cartooncontender.com. But Volume 2 should be coming out sooner than later if all goes as planned, hopefully by the end of this year.
Nice. All right. Cannot wait. And just a quick reminder for you all, by the way, if you are interested in getting Bright and Shiny, a history of animation in award shows volume 1, then do keep in mind, again, you could go and find it on bearmanormedia.com, or you can actually go and order it on Amazon, in which you could get either a paperback or a hardcover version. Now, we're going to go on to a break, and when we do come back, I'm going to go and pass the mic on to you all. So if you have any questions you would like to ask Nick in regards to the book or in regards to animation and award shows, you could go and ask away from there. But we're going to go and take a break so we could go and reset the timer for the ads, and when we do come back, then the questions will be brought up. All right, we're back, and I hope you all have your questions ready to go and ask Nick. So let's see what we have here. So do we have a question just to go and like launch off? I know the Annies are often criticized for favoring only one movie for their awards. Is that all brought up in your book? Like, it's basically the controversy regarding the fact that with the Annie Awards, often like the sweeps would be very regular, where like even this year we saw like the Wild Robot getting a sweep, or last year with Across the Spider-Verse getting a full-on sweep, and so on and so forth. I guess that is the question that's being asked. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Actually, I do get into it in the book. Not in this first volume, just because it mainly covers stuff from the early Annies, when they didn't really have competitive awards, to the early 90s, when they just started giving competitive awards. But even going back then, the Annies usually tended to favor one film. I mean, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, all kind of won in a cakewalk, which, makes sense. They came out at a time where Disney was ahead of a lot of the other winners, but nowadays you can definitely afford to spread the love, even though I'm definitely not going to complain that The Wild Robot swept. It was my favorite movie of last year, but I do believe that in spreading the love, and later volumes in the book does get into, how, they have spread the love in some years, but not always. And it's, in many ways, it's not just the Annies that does that. I mean, look at the Oscars just this year, where Anora won 5 awards out of the 6 it was nominated for. And if you look at the Emmys, they tend to play favorites as well, with shows like Succession and, The White Lotus constantly dominating. So it just kind of goes to show that a lot of voting bodies are kind of lazy with how they pick things. But we do get into the nitty gritty about the Annies, too.
Okay. That's interesting. Honestly, I haven't really thought about it because I thought with the Oscars that they would be more fair, especially when, they did spread out more. But it is true, with Anora, 5 out of the 6 nominations that it got, it's I could see where that could be problematic.
Yeah, and all 4 of them went to Sean Baker, who ironically tied Walt Disney's record for the most wins in one night, which was actually something I had to change in the book at the very last minute. We were holding off just sending it to the printer. I said, well, Sean Baker could tie this record. Why don't we just hold off on sending this to the printer in case I need to make a change? And it's a good thing I did, because otherwise it would have had a dated line in it.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, but then again, I would argue that maybe this could be an exception this year, considering the whole thing, with Emilia Perez's controversies and stuff like that. That's that might have played into a factor of how Anora got a bit of its own sweep per se.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Although I'm always going to be curious what could have been. But since Anora was my second favorite movie of last year, I'm glad that things worked out the way it did. Even despite the controversy we had to go through.
Yeah. Here's another interesting question. I know a lot of people's issues with the Oscars is that in the past it favored Disney and Pixar. Will you be covering this part in the book?
Yeah, that's also definitely a part of the book, especially in Volume 2, where it gets more into, the dawn of the Best Animated Feature category, and how it was and how a lot of people kind of associated with the so-called Pixar Disney Mafia, where they would win year after year. And in a way, history was kind of repeating itself, because when you look at when they created the Best animated short category, then it was called Best Cartoon. It mainly existed because they wanted to honor Walt Disney. And what happened? They awarded him 8 years in a row. And it wasn't until, MGM upped their game, and also Disney kind of started, Walt himself looked, he started to go away from shorts and focus more on features, that Disney started losing in that category, although they still won on occasion. And it goes to show that Academy voters are very much creatures of habit, and since Disney has been the biggest pioneer in animation in both features and, shorts, it makes sense that they would keep going for them, especially in the early years. But it does feel like now they are starting to move away from Disney, especially since Disney's films have been being more hit and miss. And even when they do, hit it, it's a sequel usually that does well. And Oscar voters usually don't go for a sequel unless it's a Toy Story film. And who knows how Toy Story 5 is going to turn out, but even if it ends up being great, I feel like, we're not going to see a ton of sequels win in the future, and since Disney is mainly putting out sequels with a few exceptions, I do think that this is going to be, a new age, a new era that we're entering, much like how, to me, Flo winning this past year is on par with something like Moonbird winning, the Best Animated Short Oscar, which was,
Right.
the first indie short to win. And even before that, John Hubley, he worked at UPA, which gave us Gerald McBoyne one, which was also the turning of a tide. So, I do think that we are going to get to a point where, or we're already at a point where Disney's, winning streak, I wouldn't say it's over completely, but the love will be spread more, I think, going forward.
Oh, okay. Here's another question. I will say it definitely is fascinating with everything you described, like animation award shows and even how animation is treated. It's definitely fascinating, and I have to ask, do you think that there is an award show that does take animation seriously?
Well, I would say that the Annies, of course, do take animation seriously, even though they do, have a tendency to favor one film overall. At the very least, you get 5 or 6 nominees in every category. It's representing a wide spectrum of animation. And even though, say what you will about, some of the Annie controversy that there's been over the years, but I do think that generally speaking, most of their winners are really good ones. And the Annies have awarded a lot of animated shows that have been in the zeitgeist, but aren't always represented elsewhere. Like, take BoJack Horseman, for example. At the Emmys, it took that show 5 seasons to finally get in, when it clearly already should have been winning by that point. And at the Annies, it was winning. It won multiple times, and he also Gravity Falls. If you go on, I think, YouTube, I think that, Alex Hirsch accepting his Annie for Gravity Falls is probably the most viewed Annie Awards video on there. So Gravity Falls got its due, and going back even further, shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender were getting their due. So I do think that the Annies, do respect, of course, they respect animation, and they do give it their due, even though they could afford to spread the love here and there, but no award show is going to be perfect, I think.
All right, that's fair. Here's another one. So you contacted people on Rocket Reach. Which thing did you just subscribe to? When research, oh boy, there's a bunch of questions. Okay, so we'll do like a bit of a lightning round. Which thing did you subscribe to when researching for the book? Were there some people you contacted who wanted to remain anonymous? How did you contend or accommodate with that? I've heard Chicken Run was originally going to be nominated for Best Picture. Did you talk to someone from Aardman about that?
Yeah. Well, with Rocket Reach, I mainly I had like a LinkedIn app where like you could get it through LinkedIn, and with Rocket Reach, I also did like the free version where you can get like 5 per month. So usually I would think to myself, well, what do I want to write about this month? And I would try to get 5 contacts through there, and that would usually be enough to like fill me like for the whole month. And I didn't have to solely rely on Rocket Reach either, because like I said, a lot of people were on Facebook or Twitter when you could more easily, DM people, and it was called Twitter. But yeah, that was mainly what I did. And sorry, what was the second question?
Let's see. Were there people that you contacted who wanted to remain anonymous?
Yeah, surprisingly, a lot of people were open to being quoted. There were, a handful of people who wanted to be anonymous. Like, I'll say, like, in a few like chapters, like, a CIFA Hollywood member said this, or an Academy member said that, but a lot of people were actually open, and they wanted their words to be out there, especially since I don't think they didn't, like, say anything that, was too scathing, and when they did say something scathing, well, it usually came from someone who really doesn't care if their, opinion is out there, because I think some of these people, they've been in the business for so long that they can kind of say anything and people will still respect them. And in regards to the Chicken Run question, it wasn't, well, you say it was originally going to get nominated for Best Picture, and, well, that wasn't really the case, because I think even the filmmakers knew that it was going to be a long shot, and I did actually speak with Peter Lord, and the thing is that he had heard that they were looking to create a Best Animated Feature category when Chicken Run was coming out, and he got really excited when he heard that, but then he found out it won't be until the next year, and he thought to himself, well, that's probably the closest we were ever going to come. And, a lot of people think that Chicken Run is the film that really prompted them to create the Best Animated Feature category, although the wheels were already in motion. People like Bill Littlejohn and June Foray had really been campaigning to make that happen, and it was just on the verge of happening around the same time that Chicken Run came out. But I do think that the fact that Chicken Run was the most acclaimed film of that year, I think, if you go by Rotten Tomatoes scores, and it got completely blanked on the Oscars. It didn't get Best Original Screenplay, no Best Score. It could have even been nominated for costumes, because if you think about it, they had a lot of miniature costumes to go with the models, and it just got completely blanked, and that's just really emphasized why they needed the Best Animated Feature category, because even though some people view the Best Animated Feature category as the, consolation prize, whether or not you think that's true, it's still better than a film like Chicken Run getting completely blanked. And if you look at these past couple of years, Into the Spider-Verse, Boy and Haran, Pinocchio, they also would have been completely blanked if we didn't have that category. So, yeah, I guess you could say that, yeah, Chicken Run was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Okay, that is interesting, because like I also have heard of like the stories about Chicken Run and how allegedly that was the one that created the Best Animated Feature category, but I guess like there's a lot more to it, and maybe Chicken Run didn't necessarily play that much of a role in the creation.
I would say that it was an important film, but there were already talks, like even going back to Beauty and the Beast, there were talks about whether or not they should create one, and some people in the animation industry were kind of against it at the time because they thought to themselves, well, if Beauty and the Beast can get nominated for Best Picture, what do we need a category for animation for? And even if they do, a lot of people thought at the time Disney is just going to get them all, so who cares? But as time went on, we saw that it wasn't just Disney. Even before the Disney Renaissance, we had people like Don Bluth and Ralph Bakshi who proved that other people could do it. And then, as the 90s went on, we had Pixar, which was technically Disney, but at the time there was no guarantee that they would stay with Disney. And then we had DreamWorks, which was, kind of had its, roots in Disney since it was Jeffrey Katzenberg. But they proved that animation, can thrive beyond Disney. And at that point, we were also seeing more international animation enter the mix with Hayao Miyazaki, Ghost in the Shell, and, Triplets of Belleville. So it became clear that we could have a legitimate race. Even if Disney may still be favored, there will still be, other worthy contenders that'll make things interesting. And the first year, Shrek won, so it showed right off the bat that Disney isn't necessarily, the de facto winner, even though that would be the case as the years went by.
Yeah, I mean, and it took a little while for Disney to even win, thinking about it. It wasn't until the third year for the Best Animated Feature category until, Finding Nemo actually got it, considering, it wasn't just Shrek, but also Spirited Away. But I do have one more question I'll go and ask. I remember the times they have an animated character presenting an award, and the last time the Oscars did it was in 2016. Who is your favorite? And also, I might as well go and enter into this as well. Will you also be talking about animated presenters during award shows as well?
As a matter of fact, yes, I do. The book Bright and Shiny Volume 1 does actually get into some specifics about that. It has a behind-the-scenes story about one year that Mickey Mouse presented with Tom Selleck, and Donald Duck was also there. Nancy Beeman, she shared a story on, I think she also shared it publicly on Facebook about how they had to reanimate part of that scene. So that was a great year. And there was also a year before that, Tom Hanks actually presented with Bugs Bunny. And even further back, there was a year where Donald Duck hosted the Oscars. He didn't exactly host. It was a year where they actually had several different hosts. And since Donald Duck presented a screen package, that they considered him a host too. And apparently, from what I found in my research, is that because of the Donald Duck segment, they had to bump a segment with Bette Davis. So Bette Davis kind of lamented, in the press that she got bumped for Donald Duck.
Oh boy, that is interesting though. Can't wait to read more of what is in store with Bright and Shiny. All right, but with that said though, we're going to go onto our first official break. And when we do come back, we're going to go into the animation stories, the animation news, and everything that has happened in this past week. And speaking of award shows, by the way, we're going to first dive into a couple of Pixar talks. And with the first one that we got, well, who knows? Maybe this could be another major award contender. But we will see after these breaks. And when we do return, we're going to be checking out a trailer. All right, we are back. Now, since we are done talking about the book, let's go and talk about some animation news, and specifically an animation trailer that we have just witnessed. Now, since we've talked a lot about the award shows and a lot of the big contenders, and even talked a lot about Disney and Pixar's presence, especially at the Oscars, do you still enjoy watching the Pixar movies? Even outside of the award shows and stuff like that? Nowadays, do you still enjoy Pixar?
Oh yeah, I definitely still enjoy Pixar, and sometimes I even find myself loving the new Pixar film. So I personally don't think that Pixar is in a slump. They just aren't necessarily up to their... I think it's safe to say that the peak of Pixar was probably 2007 through 2010, where they basically made 4 perfect movies in a row. So at that point, you kind of have unrealistically high expectations. And I'll still gladly take a film like Turning Red, Inside Out 2, and several others that we've gotten recently, or even some of their TV series like Win Win I really enjoyed. So yeah, I still think that Pixar still has the juice.
All right, that's good. Yeah, and I do agree. I mean, like, yeah, they're not as good as they used to be, but then again, can you find anyone that was as good as Pixar at that time? That's like an impossible standard.
I guess you could say maybe Francis Ford Coppola when he was making the Godfather films and Apocalypse Now, but I will take Pixar now over Francis Ford Coppola now with Megalopolis.
Yeah, that is fair. That is fair. But speaking of which, we do have the new Pixar film that is actually going to be coming very soon, since we are getting close to June, which of course is usually around the time that they would release their films. And they have presented us a new trailer of their upcoming animated feature. Now, we have seen it a few times, but this time around they're showing a little bit more than what we have seen before, especially like since they did mention a lot about Elio himself. But what about his friend that is alongside him in this journey? Well, we're about to find out as we check out the trailer for the upcoming Pixar animated feature, Elio.
It's actually kind of comfy in here. It is? I've never been in there.
And that is Elio, to which the movie is going to be coming out in theaters on June 20th. Now, Nick, I would like to know your thoughts on what we have witnessed here.
I think it has potential to be fun. Honestly, whenever I see a new Pixar movie, I'm never completely, well, a new Pixar trailer, I'm never completely blown away. But, that kind of also tempers my expectations going into the movie, and I usually walk out very pleasantly surprised, and I really shouldn't be pleasantly surprised because Pixar does have a good reputation overall, and I do think that Elio could be one of those films. It does feel, familiar in some respects, but I do think that it will ultimately be, probably an effective story of friendship, and what I am curious about is that this trailer, even though it touches some of the same beats as the trailers that we've already seen for this movie, it does introduce some new details, like, we learn more about his friendship with the alien now. And I'm curious, this movie, like, it shifted directors, mid-production, the original director is still being credited on the film, but 2 more were brought on, and with only a few months to remain. So I am curious exactly how much was, like, added and changed, if anything was really added and changed between the release of, the original trailer, which we got a while back ago, and this latest one. Like, I'm wondering if this character who's being introduced now was there from the beginning. Like, was his role expanded upon, or was that pretty much the same? So that's one thing that, we'll probably learn more about once we get a Disney Plus series about the behind-the-scenes process. But it's interesting to think about just looking at all of the trailers that have come out so far.
Yeah, I gotta say that beforehand with the previous trailers, like, as much as I wanted to be optimistic about it, I was there like, oh, you know what, I see some potential. There was still a part of me that was also doubtful because there wasn't something in there that I felt like was really selling me on the idea that it's like, oh, this I gotta see. I never really got that in the previous ones. But this one, however, I think I finally got it. I think I finally was able to see something in there that can get me excited and can want me to go and see it. And funny enough, it's actually with the little alien that befriends Elio, which is Glorden. Like, we haven't seen this character before in any of the trailers, maybe in the previous advertisements and stuff like that, but so far, this is like our first full introduction to Glorden. And yeah, like you said, maybe it goes into the typical route of friendship, but I feel like from what we have seen in this trailer, it does give it the heart that it needs in order to like tell like a full-on story that can really expand upon the characters, like with Elio and Glorden. And it's interesting that they focus on that instead of what we have previously seen in the other trailers, where they looked into the factor that Elio would lie about who he is, that they abducted him and they mistakenly thought that he's the leader of Earth. It doesn't like, maybe that plot element is still going to be there a bit, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to be the big focus from what we have seen in this trailer. It mostly seems like these two outcasts who decided to like team up and become friends in this little intergalactic adventure. And this is not to mention the other things that I find to be fantastic from what we have seen. Like the animation, of course, is just beautiful. Like very creative with the cute alien designs that they have done. Really loved it. And also, I gotta say, the humor works a lot better than what we have gotten last time, because previously they really lean hard on like the Earth kind of gag that they would do again and again. But this time around, I really like the jokes that they got in here, especially with Gordon and Elio. Like they were a lot of fun and they were effective. And especially my favorite, it would have to be with like right at the beginning with I wouldn't say, I don't think it's his actual mom, but with his or I'll say like parental guardian, which is like the broadest that I could go with, like this little gag here.
One of these is you.
I don't know, but I think that one is you.
Like, okay, that one I gotta say is actually pretty good. His aunt. Okay, yeah. It's his aunt.
Yeah, I think they changed it to Aunt around the same time they switched out America Ferrera with Zoe Saldana. So, yeah, I do think that there is a lot of potential here, and I do think we will be talking about it. I think whenever it's, Pixar related, we have to be considering it for Best Animated Feature, especially if it's an original film. And I am just excited just to see an original Pixar film because, even though they haven't completely abandoned that, they have been leaning more into sequels. And even when they're good, I do want to see them remind us why they're these innovative storytellers.
Oh, yeah. But also, one thing I got to say that is going to be very interesting in regards to Elio, since it did capture a lot of attention, and even this trailer did go pretty viral and captured some pretty positive reactions so far. I'm just wondering, how do you feel right now with when the movie shall be released? Do you think it's going to be going well in its own merit, even though it will be competing directly with the How to Train Your Dragon live action remake?
Yeah, that is an irony, seeing how we have an original animated film versus an animated live action version of an animated film that a lot of people feel they don't need. And, I'll reserve judgment until I see the How to Train Your Dragon. I'm not going to just go in saying that this is going to, be one thing or the other. But I do think that, we could see a case where maybe How to Train Your Dragon initially opens earlier, but Elio, it could have legs a lot like Elemental, or who knows, maybe How to Train Your Dragon doesn't open that well, and Elio's the one that really breaks through. You really can never know how things are going to go at the box office, really. I mean, yeah, just look at this, look at something like The Day the Earth Blew Up. Like, it didn't have the strongest marketing campaign because, there was only so much that Ketchup could do to really advertise it. But
it had a marketing campaign?
Yeah. Yeah, it was basically limited to film Twitter. I guess Warner Brothers not distributing it was the marketing campaign, reminding people that we need to show David Zaslav that the Looney Tunes still matter. And that was the campaign, and the film is actually doing pretty well. It was never going to be a $100 million film, but the fact that it's almost made back its initial budget of $15 million is a sign, that, there is, a place for hand-drawn animation, and you never know how things are going to do. And it's really living its best-case scenario, and for all we know, Elio will too.
Yeah, I've mentioned this before in the podcast, but it does remind me a little bit of like what we've recently seen with Transformers 1 and The Wild Robot. They were released one after another, and both of them were very well received and definitely fan favorites. But as it turns out, it was the original animated feature that came out on top and got a lot more attention than the prequel to the popular franchise. So yeah, maybe like there could be a chance that maybe we'll see a bit of the same thing, that like who knows how well both of them are going to do, but there is a percentage that maybe we are going to go and see Elio outperforming the How to Train Your Dragon remake. Who knows?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. And, one thing that kind of calls to mind is Happy Feet was released the same day as Casino Royale. We're going way back. And a lot of people were surprised that Happy Feet actually opened ahead of Casino Royale, and even though both ended up being big hits, it was the original film that actually got more audiences in the theater that weekend. So you really never know. The box office, like many things, is a gamble. You don't necessarily want to place money on it unless you think that you're good at gambling, which no one is.
Nah. Like if you're gonna be in the gambling mood, you might as well give your money to someone. At least make it useful instead of just giving it to the casino. No, but yeah, I will say though that overall, with the trailer that we have seen with Elio, I think honestly this is the best representation of what we've gotten with Elio so far, or at least this is the one thing that makes Elio the most promising. Like now, it did actually made it to become effective in a way that I feel like now I'm a little bit more optimistic and more anticipated to see how this movie is going to be. And that, yes, even though we have heard that there's been a bunch of production troubles, and whenever Pixar has a movie with production troubles, like with either Brave or The Good Dinosaur, for example, sometimes it doesn't necessarily go well for the feature itself. But then again, this could be one of those rare exceptions. Very similarly to someone even brought up Ratatouille as well. So in that regards, honestly, I'm pretty much excited to see how it goes. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of chaotic Pixar productions, I mean, when I spoke to Craig Good, he was a former Pixar employee, but he said that at some point every Pixar movie sucks, at the very beginning especially. But the point is that we can get it to a place where we're happy with. And talking about troubled productions, probably their most troubled production was Toy Story 2, which had to be pretty much redone with a new team coming on, like with only 9 months to complete the film, and it wound up being one of the greatest sequels of all time. So, sometimes, everything comes together, and I do think that Elio has potential to be one of those films.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to hope for the best, and we'll see how the film will go when it comes out on June 20th. Now, with that said, I would like to pass on to the chat wall, and I'd like to ask you all, what did you think of the Elio trailer? Are you guys more excited about it? Are you more doubtful about the film? Let me know what you all think. Just write down your comments and we'll see what you have to say about it. All right, so let's see here. This trailer was a pleasant surprise and definitely the best trailer we've gotten, and it definitely has potential. The story seems very creative, the animation is absolutely gorgeous, and the characters, including Elio himself, seems very charming. So overall, this definitely has a lot of potential, and I will gladly be supporting this instead of wasting my time with the How to Train Your Dragon remake. And actually, I'm going to go and ask a question onto Twitch. And I will be asking the audience here, what can I go and ask? Are you excited to see Elio after that trailer? So I'll go and write down yes, and then I'll write down no, and we'll see what people will have to say. Wait, did it pass through? Just want to double check. Hold on a sec. Wait, did it pass through? Did I actually do the poll? I don't know. I didn't. It doesn't seem to pop up here. It didn't work. Oh, for son of a fish. Hold on. I'll do it one more time. Are you excited to see Elio after that trailer? There might be a chance that maybe I accidentally hit cancel. Might have done the stupid part on me. Okay. Oh, a poll is already active. Well, where is it? I don't see it. Oh, well, okay. Never mind about that. Sorry, folks. It was worth a shot. Anyways, let's get back onto the chat wall here. This looks like it could end up being the cutest Pixar movie. The animation is really vibrant and imaginative. Elio and Glorden's friendship is adorable, and what really shocked me was how funny this trailer was. You could definitely tell the ways Domishi impacted the film. Overall, it's a must-watch. Also, while it's competing against How to Train Your Dragon, I can imagine Elio will be a good word-of-mouth hit. Maybe it won't, but hey, look at Elemental's numbers. Exactly. I mean, Elemental is like a great lesson in the impact of word of mouth for sure. Let's see what other comments here. After waiting over a year and a half, the main Elio trailer has finally been released, and I must say that it looks awesome. The new premise sounds adorable, and I love the sci-fi adventure aspect of it. I'm already connected with Elio as a character. I adore the friendship bond between him and Glorden, and the visuals look stunning. I can't wait to finally see the movie until it hits theaters on June 20th. All right. Let's see. This looks cute. I still feel bad that Adrian Molina got his movie taken away, but I'm still curious about how different is in production. I just hope the movie's faults won't be blamed on Domi Shi. I don't think it'll be my favorite Pixar movie, but I think it will be cute and charming. Elio and Glorden look and sound like adorable bean children. All right. This one looks promising to me. I had a feeling that they would be pulling out their best stops in the final trailer, including Glorden. At best, it could be another Pixar masterpiece, while at worst, it could still be a good time. Of course, this is coming from someone who thought that Onward was rather underrated. I'll most certainly be seeing this multiple times before seeing the How to Train Your Dragon remake even once, and rooting for Pixar in future endeavors, so long as they get unionized soon. Now that's another subject altogether. Recently, I did talk about it after Disney animation got unionized, so yeah, I think I might have ended up really hyping up my audience for that moment. Let's see what else. Talk about the difference is night and day. It seems like we have a completely different film than what we were originally going to get. While I wouldn't say that I'm excited for yet for the film, my interest has definitely peaked, and I'm more hopeful with the new changes shown. Here's hoping it all pays off at the end. All right, let's see. Regardless of what some may think about Pixar's recent outputs, Elio seems like it's going to be a lot of fun. This trailer did a lot more to flesh out the movie's premise than the previous trailers did. I wasn't quite sold onto it until I saw this, and now I'm hyped. If there's one thing Pixar excels at, it's comedies about friendship. I just wish the future of Pixar's creative outputs didn't rest on the shoulders of its and Hopper's box office results. Toy Story 6 must not be justified. But still, though, I'm not too worried about Pixar's future in terms of putting out original films. I mean, yes, they will still do a lot of original stuff. They will do like sequels, but I don't think that they're going to ignore original stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah, sorry about that. Thing was working there. But yeah, I do think that Pixar is going to continue to experiment outside of the box with more original movies. And I do think that, some of the sequels are kind of mandated from the higher ups at Disney, where like Ed Catmull has a very good quote in his book where he says that sometimes you have to feed the beast when you work for a studio like Disney. And in some cases, it'll be a sequel. And let's just say I'll gladly take, several Pixar sequels over several live-action Disney remakes.
Yeah, that is true. And apparently some people were able to see the poll because, well, I don't know, I wasn't able to, but apparently the grand majority of you have actually said, yes, you are excited, in which 93% have voted that they are now excited to go and see the movie, with only one that is no. Let's see. Well, I'll read a couple more comments and then we'll go on to the next break. I waited for Elio for a full year for this movie to be released, and finally we got it yet. This took into a position like Wile E, where it's just one robot, then it becomes a love story. And now we get Elio, where it's just Elio himself, but then it turns into a friendship kind of story. I actually really enjoyed this trailer, and I feel like this could have potential. Glorden feels like a likable character, and the visuals look absolutely amazing. It'll probably be better than Toy Story 5. Well, that's yet to be determined. We'll have to wait until next year for that. Let's see. I'm honestly getting strong Close Encounters vibe with a mix of E.T. and Turning Red. Yes, I know Domichi is one of the directors of Elio, so it makes sense to why it looks great. I'm liking Jonas Kibriev's voice work as Elio in this. It's a safe bet that it will be another great sci-fi Pixar film that we haven't gotten in a long time. We need more animated sci-fi films like this. Go away, escape from planet Earth. All right. Now we got one more here. Well, I gotta say, this is exciting. Even though it's from Pixar, it really doesn't surprise me. They always make films that are great. Elemental was amazing, but this film, I say, is as anticipating as much as Wile E and Lightyear, showing that movie love. Really, what it has is cute, and I know it's going to be a fun flick for the summer. I know I'm really going to enjoy. Well, there definitely is hype for Elio, so once again, if you guys are excited to go and check out that movie, then keep in mind that the film will be released on June 20th. So now we're going to go on to our next break, and when we do come back, well, we're going to go back into a subject that we have talked about, of course, with Pixar sequels. And yes, there will be another one that's going to be coming into the future, so we will go and talk about that after this break. And we are back. So we got another Pixar story to go and discuss. And Nick, I'm just curious, what is your opinion on Coco?
Well, I think that Coco is one of their best films ever, and if we were going to rank the films that they've made in the past 10 years, I'd probably have Inside Out, the original, at the very top, with Coco just a step below that. Then maybe like Soul after that. But yeah, I do hold the original in a very high regard. And when I heard they were doing a sequel, my first thought was, well, I don't know if we really need this. But when I saw, that they were bringing back the original directors, including Lee Unkrich, coming out of retirement, I thought, this could really have potential to be something special like the original.
Oh, yeah. And that is exactly what we are talking about here. Yes, folks, it is official. We are going to be getting a Coco 2. Now, to give you a little bit of some context on what actually happened, this actually occurred during Disney's annual shareholders meeting, in which there have been several things that have been brought up during that time, in which Bob Iger did discuss about some things, some that are not as popular, including the discussions about AI and how Disney has some powerful tools for AI. I know that is kind of a controversial subject altogether in that. But then also there are some other things that he mentioned that are more exciting to hear about. These include thinking about an idea about making some short form videos with Figment from Journey into Imagination, or also the Disney shareholders unanimously voting that Disney still supports and that they are still working with LGBTQ plus groups. But the biggest announcement of them all was the fact that Bob Iger revealed that Pixar is going to be working on Coco 2. Now, this is still very early in production. We still don't know what's going to be going on with it, and they are planning to go and have this be released in 2029. So it's still going to be quite a long time until we know what is going to be in store with this movie. However, what is confirmed, as Nick has previously mentioned, is that two of the directors, or at least the main directors who have worked on the original, Lee Unkrich is going to be coming back as director, in which he will be coming back from retirement to do so, as well as Adrian Molina will be back into this as a co-director, alongside Mark Nielsen, who is going to be a producer in this. In fact, even Lee Unkrich himself actually confirmed this on his Instagram page, where I'll go and read you the post that he made, in which it states, "I'm really excited to share that I have returned to Pixar to direct Coco 2, reuniting with Adrian Molina as my co-director. We're both deeply grateful that Coco remains so beloved and have already been having so much fun diving back into this world." So, even though you did mention a little bit of your thoughts, how do you feel that now Pixar is going to be making a Coco 2?
Yeah, I do think that there, like I said, I do think that this world has a lot of promise and that there's more that you can explore with this world. My real question is exactly, when exactly is it going to take place? Is this going to be like Finding Dory and Incredibles 2, where it pretty much took place around the same time as their, predecessors, or will it be more like Toy Story 3, where they aged up the character? Because I do think, there is real potential there if they age up Miguel. Maybe at this point, by the time it comes out, Miguel was 12 in the original. If they go in real time, he'll be in his 20s by the time that Coco comes out. They could even bring back the original voice actor rather than recast. And, it could be about him connecting with his kid. Maybe there's another generational gap. And, you could explore more with this world. And also, maybe even, what happens beyond, the great beyond. So, yeah, I am excited to see more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will say that at first when I heard about it, like I was surprised, and it does sound a bit of a weird concept because like with Coco, it is one of those films that it works so well in itself. Like you don't necessarily need to go and really expand it. And some people have even mentioned in the chat that like it does feel like a standalone film, that you don't need anything more other than what we have just gotten with Coco. So trying to make a sequel, it feels a little bit perplexing to think of like, what could they go and do and continue the story when the story itself like really works well in its own way? That it kind of feels odd that suddenly Coco would have, like, not Coco, like she's already there technically, but like what would Miguel do to go back into the land of the dead? But then my thoughts have pretty much changed. And I felt a little bit more optimistically curious when I did see Lee Unkrich coming back. Because I mentioned this to you during the break, but it's quite surprising because like it's already been several years that Lee Unkrich was retired. It was not long after the first movie was released and not long after John Lasseter was fired from Pixar and Disney, where he decided that he's just going to be retired, that he'll do his own thing and he'll move on from making animated films and stuff like that, let alone making animated films at Pixar. But to see him come back and working on Coco 2 alongside with Adrian Molina, so basically they're kind of having the original team working together, it kind of feels like it's a pretty good promise to see that maybe they got something great in store. That if they're willing to get back into Coco, they must have like a special idea of what they can do in order to go and expand the story. And I mean, the possibilities are endless. Like you mentioned, that maybe maybe they could do a direct sequel, or maybe there's going to be, there's like a time passage. And for me, I would prefer to see I would rather see a time passage so that like the original Miguel is still the voice of Miguel, kind of like, like you said, like kind of like what they did with Toy Story 3, where I believe it was the original voice actor of Andy in the first film reprise his role in the third. So maybe we'll also see the same thing in that.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot that you can really do with that world. And, it probably doesn't hurt that the original Coco made almost $800 million at the box office. But I do think that Lee Unkrich wouldn't be coming back unless he really thought that, there was a story worth telling there. Otherwise, they'd probably pass it on to, another up-and-comer at Pixar.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So, but then again, it's like, it's still way ahead in production. It's still like very early on. It's still like in 2029 that's going to be coming out. So now we got 3 confirmed Pixar sequels that are going to be released in the future. So we know that there's going to be like, we got Toy Story 5 already, like coming soon next year. We know Incredibles 2 is going to be there, where allegedly I did hear Brad Bird is only going to be a producer. I don't know if he's going to be back as a director. No confirmation as of yet. It's mainly because he is still I believe from what's been reported, he is still working at Skydance, working on his Ray Gunn movie. And then and now we got Coco 2 as well. So there are definitely a bunch of sequels that we are getting, but with this one though, especially with the directors coming back, it does show promise.
Yeah. And I think it's only a matter of time that they announce Inside Out 3, assuming they haven't already and I just missed it. Pretty sure they haven't yet, though.
Maybe. I think I've seen some things about like the possibility that they'll do with an Inside Out 3, but I think like something like that would be something they would go and save for like D23, you know, make a big announcement for that. And I mean, like at this point, like considering that it is like, or it was the highest grossing animated feature until Neja 2 came in. But still, though, like the highest grossing American animated feature of all time. I think it would be a safe bet that somewhere in the future they would do an Inside Out 3. But then again, that would not be soon, though. I'll even say, I don't think we're going to see an Inside Out 3 this decade. It'll be like somewhere in 2030 or beyond.
Yeah, I'd say it'd probably be the same amount of passage of time that we got between the first two films.
Yeah, it's actually, it's true that it's been like 10 years since, it's been 9 years between the first and the second. So yeah, it'll be, for sure. Like if there is an Inside Out 3, that's going to be like in 2030 or whatever, or like in the 2030s.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Actually, this is interesting. Someone, sorry, just to go on a side thing. Someone actually mentioned in the chat that did anyone read that Ray Gunn script? By the way, my friend found it and it's apparently bad. Oh dear. That did you know about this? Did you know if the script was leaked or anything?
I haven't heard anything about it. I've just heard that he's been working on this film for who knows how long now, and apparently he's making it Skydance, and that's really the most I've heard.
Yeah, same here. Like that's all I knew about. I didn't know anything about the script being leaked, or let alone that it was bad. And I'm honestly shocked because that seemed to be the one project from Skydance Animation that feels like, oh, that's the that feels like the one that, okay, maybe that could be worth watching, because I don't know about you, but the Skydance Animation stuff that we've seen, that we've gotten so far, yeah, y'all think Disney is bad? Yeah, wait till you see Skydance.
Yeah, the thing about Skydance is that even if you take out the controversy, with John Lasseter, one of the problems is it feels like they're trying to be like Pixar and Disney when they really need to forge a more original path. I mean, Luck felt very much like it was trying to be a Pixar film, Spellbound felt very much Disney-esque, even bringing Alan Menken on board. And, even though a lot of these movies have great talents involved, they got to find something that's more unique and not just, Disney-esque.
Exactly. Sorry, go on. Didn't mean to
interrupt. I was done.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. I absolutely agree. Like, Skydance needs their own original voice, their own way of storytelling, other than to be like Disney or like Pixar. Like, I think that, that's why I've been advocating that they just get rid of John Lasseter, because they're just thinking too much of trying to be like Disney. Like they, don't lean into the John Lasseter style of filmmaking. Go with your own voice. Find someone new to lead the charge of Skydance, to find their own voice.
That said, with Brad Bird, helming Ray Gunn, we don't know, because for all we know, Brad Bird's track record isn't perfect, seeing how Tomorrowland wasn't that great, but everything else he's done has been, pretty spectacular. So I do think that if you just let him cook, he could turn out something really good for Skydance. But, and as for the script that's been supposedly linked, who knows? Maybe it's like an early draft. Maybe it's been changed since then, because look at something like Finding Nemo. When Michael Eisner saw the early cut of that, he said, yeah, that's not going to be a huge hit for us. That'll give us some leverage over Pixar. But the movie went through a lot of changes since that time. So for all we know, Ray Gunn could go through the same thing, or maybe it'll just follow the same trajectory as other Skydance films. We won't really know until it comes out, assuming it comes out at all, because it feels like everything is getting canceled here and there.
Yeah, true. Oh no. Or a better example I just thought of, Toy Story, how it was originally. Oh my God, with the evil Woody. Oh God, that Black Friday screening though, man. Oh yeah, that is an example of how like the original draft can be so different than what we ultimately got.
Yeah. It's like Craig Good said, at some point, every Pixar movie sucks in production.
Yeah, exactly. But anyways, sorry that we went a bit sidetracked here. But yes, but anyways, going back to what we are discussing with Coco 2. Overall, though, even though it is still very early in production and stuff like that, the factor so far with Lee Unkrich coming back, as well as Adrian Molina being the co-director, honestly, there's intrigue. I'm not going to say there's hype immediately, but I will say there is intrigue where it could go somewhere that maybe this sequel might get on the levels of the first. And I know that's a very high bar, but its chances of reaching there are not zero.
I mean, Pixar has gone there before with the Toy Story 2 and 3, and even though 4 is kind of viewed as the dark sheep of the franchise, it's still really good and not that far below the others, and I'd say it's about on par with Inside Out 2, which again, maybe not quite on the same level, but, much closer than a lot of people were giving it credit. And, even if it was something on, Finding Dory level, I think that audience would still be satisfied.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, with that said, I would like to go onto the chat wall, and I'd like to ask you all, what do you think of a Coco 2 coming out in 2029? Are you guys excited for it? Are you guys a bit hesitant to see what's in store? Let me know what you all think. Let's see now. I love the original Coco, and I'll admit that I was unsure at first, but hearing Lee Unkrich coming to direct definitely got me excited, and I could definitely see how they can expand on the original with a new story. So overall, we'll see. Also, I feel like the only reason Disney and Pixar are making all these sequels is so that they can all have their animated films financially successful again, even if they have to rely on the biggest animated properties to do so. I mean, yeah, that's pretty much the main thing, they have to go and find something that could really work for them. And I mean, it's not necessarily Disney and Pixar's fault here. It's mostly like, it kind of revolves around like a bigger issue that's eclipsing the entire cinematic environment per se. It's the factor that, it's not just Disney and Pixar, it's pretty much everybody who's becoming more dependent on IPs and sequels and stuff like that. So they got to go and try to make something that can go and like really work. And even if someone like Disney is having a bit of a hard time producing something original that can actually be very successful at the box office, not just be profitable, but like be a massive box office hit like their previous films were, then yeah, they would have to go and like get into the sequels. I mean, like, I understand the frustrations with all the IPs and sequels and stuff like that, but I feel like this is a much bigger issue that it's not just Disney and Pixar that are causing the problems.
Yeah. Disney might be the easiest target just because it is, the biggest studio in the world, or at least one of the biggest ones, but Warner Brothers is just as guilty as this, so is Paramount. And
Universal as well. Absolutely, yeah. Universal.
And, it's not like audiences don't hold some blame either, because you look at what's making the money right now. Mickey 17, it's an awesome film, but not enough people are seeing it. But a lot of people went to go see Captain America Brave New World, which, I didn't hate or anything. It was, pure escapism, but no one's going to be talking about it a year from now, including the people who saw it.
Yeah, that is fair. Let's see now. No surprise to me that Coco has been greenlit for a sequel. Of course, I have no doubt that they are capable of finding a way to make a sequel that feels like a natural expansion to the original story. After all, when Inside Out came out, I loved it so much that I doubted that the sequel to that movie could possibly work, and lo and behold, even if I felt that certain Pixar movies worked fine without a sequel, I can't really think of any that do exist and were real stinkers since Cars 2. All right, let's see. I've gotten on record saying Coco is my second favorite Pixar movie behind Wile E, but with this announcement, I have to say, look, It's cool that we got Lee Unkrich back, but what else can they do? It's not a bad idea. I'm just wondering where they can go with the story. Granted, we still have a little over 4 years. They may be cooking. It's just an observation. But all will be forgiven before Frozen 3. They show the entirety of the first Pixar Coco. That would be a fitting piece of marketing. Yeah, that is true. And I mean, like, again, like, if we're going to know more info about this, it's definitely going to be at D23. Like, maybe even next year. Like, that will still probably be too early, but they'll probably discuss a bit more, like show a little bit of like what could be in store. Let's see now. I know that some people are doubtful about Coco 2, but I see a lot of potential here, especially since the sequel could end up exploring the lore behind the Day of the Dead. Also, Hayao Miyazaki would be very proud that someone would be continuing his legacy of being a retirement troll. Okay, well, to be fair, Lee Unkrich did that just one time. Miyazaki is just like, it's an everyday occurrence. You know, that's his ritual, basically. You know, that's his ritual for every production, to go, or almost every production, to go and retire and then suddenly come back when he has a new movie. And even nowadays, he kind of gave up on that shtick, and already he's working on his next movie. Like, even after doing The Boy and the Heron, now he wants to do another movie right now.
Yeah. Give Lee Unkrich more time, though. He could retire a few more times to catch up to Miyazaki.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, oh my god, that could be like an amazing life goal, like to go and break that record. Most retirements while making more films simultaneously. All right, let's see what we got here. Welcome back, Lee Unkrich. We all miss you and your amazing directing skills. I could see more Mexican culture popping up in Coco 2. Stuff like Mexican bingo and more lucha wrestling. I'd like to see Miguel going into Mexico City with his family and undead family on a road trip, or Miguel doing more of his music passion. Just spitballing ideas here. Oh, who am I kidding? I'm extremely excited for this, and I'm a proud Mexican guy that adores this film. All right, nice. Okay, let's see here. I've always said that there are 3 standalone Pixar movies I want sequels to: Elemental, Wile E, and Coco. Lucky for me, Pixar is making a sequel to at least one of them. I'm not sure where they'll be able to take the story after the ending of the first one, but maybe that's why I'm not making it. The best I could come up with is making it a crossover with Soul or The Book of Life. At least with Inside Out 2 making all the money, Pixar won't be scared of aging up the Coco characters. Yeah, that is true. I mean, like, you know, it's not just with Andy, but even Riley kind of aged up a little bit, even if it's just by a few years. Like, the difference between like how Riley was in the first and then seeing her as a young teenager in the second, like, there is a bit of an age difference.
Yeah. And, you know, going back to one of his comments, technically Disney does own the Book of Life now, so a crossover isn't out of the question.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see. Like, how, you know, even if it is like a cameo or something like that, I would love to see Jorge Gutierrez actually get involved in the production. See, you know, like even give his personal artistic touch to to Coco and see where the style can go with this. It would be very fascinating to see.
Yeah, at the very least, they could do a short for Disney Plus.
Yeah, that is true. There are possibilities, and I mean, hey, if the Book of Life characters can make a cameo in The Simpsons, especially like with one of the recent couch gags, then I could see like a Pixar, like a cameo in something Pixar related.
Yeah.
All right, I think I'll read one more comment and then we'll go on to our next break. So let's see here. Well, it is anticipating, but all I ask is, what will it be about? This has some interest, but I can never think of how they can really expand the storyline, considering that I thought it was fine with how it was in the first film. In one theory, I figured it would be about the villain De La Cruz, since I didn't think that the people would immediately think of his crimes were real after from one piece of evidence of Hector's diary. That, and I thought it was a bit of a plot hole, since who knows how they'll pull this off, just a guess. Oh, that would be interesting, actually. Like, instead of a sequel, well, okay, well, I mean, maybe this is just a bit of an idea because it is confirmed as a sequel, but actually make it a prequel about when Hector and Ernesto were alive. Do that kind of plot line to see like how they were once like a musical duo, and then there's that whole backstabbing that occurred.
Yeah, it could be the good version of Mufasa.
Yeah, in a way, it could be like that, actually. All right, so if you guys are interested in Coco 2, well, keep in mind that let Pixar cook and we'll see how things go when the movie will be released in 2029. All right, so that's pretty much our Pixar talk here. And when it comes to our next story, we're going to go onto our break first. But when we do come back, we're going to talk about another film that may possibly come back. We don't know. We might see an official release of this. But if it were, then holy crap, we're going to see a tremendous new chapter for Wile E. Coyote. So stay tuned for that. Okay, welcome back. Now, when it comes to our next story, we're going to be stepping aside from Pixar, and now we're going to be moving to another studio where there are some negotiations happening. But this is actually related to a tragic story, a movie that had a lot of hype and anticipation, but sadly, at least for now, it doesn't seem to be seeing the light of day per se. So, Nick, just out of curiosity, you've been aware of all the stories and all the news related to what's been going on with Coyote versus Acme and how it's currently just considered a tax write-off for Warner Brothers, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they've officially ever written it off, but that's definitely how it's been treated. And yeah, it's the best. Even though I can't say of the movie's quality, having not seen it, it is probably going. It has looked like the best movie that, may never be released, although that might not be true for very long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens, but it looks like for now, the story may not necessarily be over for Coyote versus Acme, as there is one company coming in, giving it another shot to see if they can get it released. Yes, right now, Ketchup Entertainment, the same distributors that has brought us The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, or at least in North America, they are currently in talks with Warner Brothers Discovery in order to get the rights to Coyote versus Acme in the hopes that they could have it be released in 2026. Now, specifically to go and read you from my source here on Deadline, it actually states right over here, well, I mean, it's pretty much what I've said. Gareth West's distributor/financer, Ketchup Entertainment, is negotiating an all rights acquisition in the $50 million range for the animated live-action hybrid project. Ketchup last year rescued the same studio's The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie. The pact isn't finalized, and there's still a chance it doesn't make, but it's heading in the right direction. Should it get over the line, the film would get a theatrical release in 2026. Now, it is worth noting, by the way, that so far, as I am recording this, there is no confirmation as to how the deal is going. So far, it seems like it's still only in the negotiation phase. So far, they're still in talks. We don't have a confirmation if things are going well or if this ultimately fell through and it's pretty much back to the drawing board for Coyote versus Acme. But what we know so far is that Ketchup Entertainment is negotiating with Warner Brothers. So, Nick, what do you think about the entire situation?
Well, I think that this latest news story I think this is what hope feels like, and I haven't felt that for a while, especially concerning Coyote versus Acme, because a while back they did say that they were shopping it around and that it could potentially be picked up, and when that fell through, I thought to myself, well, that's it. David Zaslav won. Art is dead, and we're just never going to see this movie unless someone has on a disc drive somewhere and they're brave enough to leak it. And now, with Ketchup, they've already saved the day the Earth blew up, and I can only hope that they succeed in saving, Coyote versus Acme 2, and I can only hope that, it ends up being as good as everyone has said it is, who has actually seen the film, and that it ends up, proving that, the Looney Tunes still matter and are still, can still be a very profitable franchise.
Yeah, I am hoping as well because, like, on one hand, it is very positive to hear that there is going to be another deal happening to give Coyote versus Acme at least a chance to go and get released, especially with Ketchup Entertainment, considering that they're already doing this move with The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie. Now, say what you will about how it is doing at the box office. It's not necessarily great, but then again, with how it is performing so far, it's not necessarily a lost cause, and there could be a chance that maybe it could even surpass $10 million at the box office, or at least just domestically. And if it's able to do so, then at least it does show that there is a little bit of intrigue. So seeing them like to go and take action after those results with The Day the Earth Blew Up, it shows that with Ketchup Entertainment that they have enthusiasm with releasing Looney Tunes projects, and that maybe they could go and do the same with Coyote versus Acme. Now, with $50 million, that alone is still quite a major ask. But still, though, like seeing them to actually go and give it a shot, like, it definitely is admirable. And I think Looney Tunes fans have a newfound massive love for Ketchup Entertainment, considering that they are they are playing a big part in keeping the spirit of the Looney Tunes alive. But then again, though, it is worth mentioning that it's hard to really know if Warner Brothers is actually going to go and agree on the deal, considering that in the past, they have played hardball before. The one important thing to go and keep in mind is that with Coyote versus Acme, the budget is $70 million. And with that said, even though I myself and many other people have pointed this out, that it is pretty hypocritical, considering how the tax write-off would just give them 30 million or something like that. But then when there was interest in getting Coyote versus Acme, there were others that wanted to get it as well, like Amazon, Netflix, and even Paramount at one point. Warner Brothers was asking a lot. They wanted a bare minimum of 80 million or something like that. They wanted to make sure that they could actually make a profit now that there seemed to be this intrigue for Coyote versus Acme, but there were no plans that fell through. So right now, and I guess this could be a major factor as to why we haven't seen a whole deal go on so far. It's just that with Coyote versus Acme, we don't know if Warner Brothers is going to be at the point where they would actually care, or seeing the results of The Day the Earth Blew Up, if it really did matter to the point that, maybe they can go and actually, give them a shot at it. Or if Warner Brothers is still going to be stubborn and they're still going to be asking for 80 million or something like that, and the 50 million might not necessarily work out. So that's going to be the big mysterious aspect. Just wondering, Nick, what do you think with, how do you feel how Warner Brothers is right now? Do you think that they're going to be stubborn about it and still ask for a lot more? Or do you think there might be some leeway to go and convince them for less?
Well, I think Warner Brothers is always going to play hardball, but I do think that they do know going in that Ketchup Entertainment probably, not only that they, unlike Netflix or Amazon or Paramount, I don't think that a company like Ketchup Entertainment can pay, what they were asking for those studios. Because, Ketchup, it's still, a smaller company with only so many employees. It's not this giant. They can probably afford 50 million, but they probably aren't going to be able to afford the 70 million or the 80 million or anything above that. And considering what Warner Brothers would have gotten with a write-off, I do think that 50 million is, a pretty good deal for them. It's a pretty good deal for Ketchup Entertainment, especially if the movie ends up, making money. So I do think that, I'm no financial expert, but I do think that this is the best bet that Warner Brothers has, while also potentially saving a little face, considering how they've already dragged this movie through the mud for so many years.
Yeah, that is true. Although there is one thing that I do want to ask, and this might be a little bit in the controversial direction, but do you think Ketchup Entertainment would be the best to go and actually have the rights to it? Do you think Ketchup Entertainment would be the right one to go and distribute Coyote versus Acme? Because if you look at what they're doing right now with The Day the Earth Blew Up, like, yeah, they're only doing like the best they can in terms of like the marketing and stuff like that. But as you said, they are still a relatively small studio. So I'm just wondering, do you think it's a good idea to give it to Ketchup Entertainment, or should it be someone bigger?
Well, at this point, I do think that Ketchup is the best place for it to go because they have treated, The Day the Earth Blew Up with, maybe not with the best. They've given it the best red carpet treatment that they possibly can. In an ideal world, both of those films would have been distributed by Warner Brothers, who are synonymous with the Looney Tunes and, will likely always be, synonymous with them. And, if they really had to take it to another place, when I heard they were doing it, I thought Amazon might be the best choice because they put, Batman the Caped Crusader on there. So I figured, well, if they can give Batman a home, maybe they can also give the Looney Tunes home. And if not there, maybe to go to Netflix, which has, branched out with a lot of different franchises. And if those two aren't going to work out, then at this point, I do think that Ketchup is probably the best home for Coyote versus Acme. Sure, there are like bigger ones that could have gone, but if you're not going to work out there, you might as well, give it to a studio that actually, respects the films that they're releasing.
Yeah, that is true. I guess like if they run out of options, then I guess with Ketchup it would be the best one. Just a funny thing though is that I've talked about this before with before in the podcast and with fans and stuff like that. One crazy idea I was thinking is that if maybe Disney would somehow come in and actually save it, like either give it a Disney Plus release or just theatrically release it. Like I know it's like it's impossible to think and it would go like very much outside of their brand, but still though, it would be an insane power move to watch.
It would be pretty amazing, but I think at this point, if they're going to snatch up any, like any IP that Warner Brothers is kind of kicking to the side, Sesame Street would probably be the most sense because that's going to need a new home soon. And seeing how they already have the Muppets, that makes sense. But that's a conversation for another time, I guess.
Yeah, I've actually talked about that as well. And even like, trust me, even as a Disney fan myself, I do feel like it's a bit iffy. And that's mainly because of the history with Sesame Street and Disney and stuff like that. Considering that Disney has a legit history of trying to persuade Jim Henson and the Sesame Street to join their company to be alongside the Muppets that they already own. So like even that, like, I don't know, I'm seeing how Disney is treating the Muppets and I'm like, I don't know if I want them to like be like that with Sesame Street. That's a thing that I'm like, I don't know, man. So yeah, I feel like with Sesame Street, I don't know. I feel like I trust Disney a little bit more with the Looney Tunes before I trust them with Sesame Street. I know it's a bit of a hot take, but that's just my personal feeling. Both like knowing Disney and knowing the Muppets, it's like, yeah, there are some things that I'm just not sure about.
Yeah. In ideal world, I think that the Sesame Street would return to PBS because I feel like that's where the show always belonged because it's easier for everyone to access and not just people with, Max accounts. Not that anyone has a Max account anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, we're like until I guess until like the next season of The Penguin comes out or the next season of The Last of Us, there's no real point yet to have like a Max account. But yeah, so far though, I will say, but actually, I guess all in all, do you think that at the end of the day, with all this discussions that we've had, do you think, what do you think the outcome is going to be? Do you think it's more likely or less likely that Ketchup Entertainment will have Coyote versus Acme?
I do think that if anyone is going to get it, it's going to be Ketchup Entertainment. And the fact that this news story is actually, broken and is out there, I think does bode well. I would be feeling more confident if we heard more, because it's been a little bit since then, but, it goes to show they're still at the negotiating table, but I am cautiously optimistic that this could work out in the long run, and if not, well, like I said, there's got to be someone out there with the film on a thumb drive. Just leak it somehow.
Yeah, I mean, with all the lost things that have recently been discovered, and trust me, we will get to that a little bit later. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised it hasn't even happened yet. Like, I feel like, yeah, one way or another, there's going to be a time we will see Coyote versus Acme, rather if it's legal or not.
I do think that's one of the reasons we haven't seen it yet, just because there has been, hope that it might happen, and if there's still hope that it can be released in theaters, then, well, hold up off on, leaking it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So I guess we're just going to wait and see with how this goes, and maybe eventually in the near future, we will get an update. And with that said, now I would like to go on to the chat wall, and I'd like to ask you all, what do you think about Ketchup Entertainment negotiating with Warner Brothers in order to get Coyote versus Acme? Do you think it's going to happen? Do you think Warner Brothers is not going to accept their deal? Let me know what you all think. In fact, I'm going to go and do another poll. I'm going to try to give that another shot, and I'll see if maybe it'll actually work this time. Do you think, let's see, do you think Ketchup will get Coyote versus Acme? So I'll just write down yes, and I'll write down no, and maybe it will work this time. Let's see. Okay. Oh, now I see the poll. There we go. All right. So let's see what the chat wall has to say here. Let's see now. Okay. Well, to say there is a lot of hope for it, yet quite surprising that it might have a second chance. I know the story in itself is pretty much a lot to go through considering the amount of hustling Warner Brothers committed to this. Now I will say though, is it worth the anticipation? I mean, it was made in the time of Space Jam 2 and Tom and Jerry. Not judging right off the bat, this is going to be bad. Not judging right off the bat that this is going to be bad. I don't want to have that sense of overhype like with the recent movie that came from Ketchup. I mean, we will see. I mean, so far, from the word of mouth, it seems quite positive, at least from the very few who were lucky enough to go and see it. But I don't know. Well, like, I think we'll go one step at a time. First and foremost, let's see if the movie will get released. And when it does, then we'll think about, is it good or not? All right, let's see what else we have here. If Ketchup Entertainment is the only way to watch Coyote versus Acme, then so be it. I'd rather see a film getting released one way or another over getting hidden for so many years. Also, while you're at it, can we find a way to release Scoob Holiday Haunt as well, even though that film probably sucks? I do get what you mean, and I mean, yeah, we'll see. Maybe another time. Hold on a sec. Whoa, not, excuse me for a sec. You can go and respond to that. I gotta go and blow my nose.
Yeah, bless you there. And yeah, I do hope that they can release Scoob Holiday Hunt, whether it's good or bad. I do want to see it. And the same goes for Batgirl, which was also virtually done, and I don't really know how that would, fit into James Gunn's universe, but that's clearly already kind of inconsistent. So yeah, let's just release all of the stuff that David Zaslav have tried to bury, I say. One way or another.
Yeah, especially that Batman that Batgirl movie. I am curious to see what they've done, especially to see like Brendan Fraser playing as a villain. I really want to see that.
I mean, we're in the middle of the Fraser-sance, we gotta, see it all.
Oh yeah. Although, honestly, okay, this is just a wild idea just to think about right now, but like this is just like a random like thing that burst into my head. Considering that we're in the Fraser-sance, do you think Disney would go and talk to him to say, hey, Brendan, since you're making a comeback, do you want to come back as George for George in the Jungle? Like a little Disney Plus project we want to do? Honestly, I would be curious to see that. I want to see a comeback of George of the Jungle.
I could definitely see that. I don't know if they do it because I do think they are moving more and more away from Disney Plus content because, Freakier Friday was going to be a Disney Plus original, but now it's going to theaters because they're realizing that, streaming, it doesn't really make a ton of financial sense if unless you're Netflix. And even then, 300 million on the electric stake, their choices don't make a ton of sense either. But yeah, I'd be all for, seeing, Brendan Fraser come back. The real question is, would it be George of the Jungle 2, or would they do George of the Jungle 3, recognizing the straight-to-video sequel as canon?
Oh, they would. I mean, knowing the tone of the George of the Jungle films, they would. Just for funsies. And by the way, I did check out the poll on Twitch, and this is another case that it's almost unanimous, in which 94% of you who have voted are actually optimistic about it, and you do think Ketchup Entertainment will end up getting Coyote versus Acme. So I see a lot of you are very hopeful for that. All right, so let's see what other comments we have here. This honestly got me very extremely excited. The fact Coyote versus Acme might actually finally get to see the light of day, especially thanks to Ketchup Entertainment. Honestly, I definitely have hope, as long as Zaslav doesn't do something stupid. Honestly, if Coyote versus Acme does get released, that movie and Nimona could get the biggest comeback stories for movies. Oh, absolutely. Let's see now. Let's see. Where is it? Oddly enough, someone copy pasted another comment here. Kind of weird. Oh, here we go. I remember the celebrations going on left and right at this announcement, and rightly so. Praying hard that this deal happens. This is one of the most, if not the most, uplifting story of hope for the underdog. Okay, maybe not the most, maybe for movies, but anyways, go Ketchup Entertainment. Also, I hope The Day the Earth Blew Up it makes a decent amount for its extended run in theaters. I've seen it twice already and plan to see it at least once more. This goes to show that there can be miracles when you believe. All right, I think I'll read one more comment here to see if there's anyone else who has anything to say. I don't have much to say here, but I absolutely do hope that this happens so we could give Zaslav the biggest middle finger of all time. All right, so with that said, though, while the negotiations are still going to be going on, we got one more story to get into, and when we come back, speaking of lost media, we're going to go and look into one that has recently been discovered, and oh boy, did it make quite an impact, and it got a lot of people talking on the internet, and soon it's going to be our turn to take a look into this lost pilot, so stay tuned for that. All right, this is it, folks. We got one more story to get into, which, of course, you know what that means, everybody. It's about time we're getting into the grand finale. And with this grand finale, we're going to go and discover some lost media. Or it's already been discovered and many people have talked about it, but it's going to be our turn to have our discussions. Now, Nick, just out of curiosity, did you watch some Family Guy, or do you still watch Family Guy?
I watched it regularly, and I even had, the original, DVDs that came out. And at the time, I thought that would be, all of Family Guy that we had ever got. So when it came back, I was ecstatic, and for the first several years it came back, yes, I did watch it religiously, and even as it kind of became more inconsistent, I still, watched it. I haven't kept up with some of the latter seasons, but, I do still have a lot of affection for the show, as, a lot of people do.
Yeah, I would say that I'm on the same boat as you. Like, when I was a young teen, I used to watch a lot of Family Guy, and for a few years, I used to watch it, almost regularly, every Sunday whenever there's a new episode coming out. So yeah, there's been a good amount of years that I used to watch a lot of Family Guy alongside The Simpsons. Admittedly, it's been a while since I've seen any of the new episodes of Family Guy, but I mean, from time to time, I do see some clips that are on YouTube, with some of the, with some of the cutaway gags with, I kind of got a little bit of a bit of an idea of how things are nowadays, but we're not going to talk about Family Guy now. I'm talking about Family Guy then, or specifically what Family Guy used to be with the Lost Pilot. Yes, one of the biggest animation news that happened last week was the fact that the Lost Pilot of Family Guy has been discovered. Now, when it comes to this version of Family Guy here, technically some people have already seen it, but they've only seen about half of it, considering that it had already been circulating around. In fact, it was already released on the Volume 2 DVD of Family Guy. But in this case here, this is a little bit different because this is actually the full pilot, because beforehand they only showed around 7 to 8 minutes, but this time this is the full 16-minute episode. And to go and give you the story of how they actually found this out, let me go and actually read you here from my source on AV Club, in which it states, as it is often the case with the kind of rediscovered finds, the full version of the demo was discovered in a fairly random and innocuous place, i.e. the website of animator Robert Paulson. Not, we feel like it's important to clarify, the well-known voice actor Rob Paulson of Pinky and the Brain fame. Paulson, who is credited for digital inks and paints and compositing on the episode, apparently uploaded the video of his work portfolio back in 2022, or he uploaded the video to his work portfolio back in 2022, but it went undiscovered for several years, until it was recently found by user Ghost the Dead Girl of the Lost Media Wiki Discord. And from there, everybody has been talking about what they have witnessed in the Family Guy Lost Pilot, now fully talking about what they have seen here. So, just out of curiosity, Nick, what did you think of the Lost Pilot?
Well, like you've mentioned, my first exposure to the original Family Guy pilot was when it was on the Volume 3 DVD. And in that version, it cuts off right around the same time that Peter goes on welfare. And I assumed at the time, I guess that's all they filmed. That's all they bothered to animate, seeing how this was just the pilot. So when I heard that, that the entire thing had been found, I'm like, what? There's an entire thing? And looking back, I actually, got major deja vu just going back, remembering what was different, what was the same. And, it's definitely just the blueprints of what Family Guy would be. But it's still kind of a proper representation of what it became, where, it's basically gag after gag, and it's more joke-based than character-based sometimes, especially in this Lost Pilot, because, Peter and Stewie, they have a decent idea about who they are, but everyone else, hasn't been fully formed yet, and that would definitely change between the original pilot and the later pilot. So, it is an interesting artifact. Even though, it kind of reminds me of that episode of Family Guy where Stewie and Brian go back to the pilot episode and they kind of comment on how the animation, isn't as polished. And I can only imagine how they would respond if they went back to this pilot just to see, how everyone almost sounds the same and how the animation is really rough, but there is an undeniable charm to that.
Yeah, I will admit that watching this, it is definitely a fascinating piece of animation history, considering how Family Guy is now one of the biggest adult animated series of all time. It is interesting to see how some of the things have originated, like the format of the cutaway gags, seeing the original idea of what they want to do with the family and stuff like that. And even the signature style of the visuals of Family Guy, how they try to develop, they start trying to develop that, and how, yes, it is true that for the most part with this, it's kind of basically what we've seen with the pilot. It's kind of basically a prototype of what we have ultimately gotten with the first real episode, which I do believe it is called Death of a Shadow or something. Yeah, Death Has a Shadow. So it is pretty much like a prototype to that. But I gotta say, as someone who has seen Family Guy for years, and even though it's been a while since I've seen any of the new episodes, it was a weird experience. It was a weird trip revisiting this Family Guy. And one of the reasons is how there are so many things that really do differentiate, not just from like how Family Guy is now, but even from back then. And like one of the most prominent differences is actually Chris, because this pilot was even before they brought in Seth Green to be the voice of Chris, and they only had it was Seth Green again doing the voice. So just to give you a little bit of an example, just to make you listen to it. And okay, there was a fart that actually got away there, oddly enough. Where is it? Yeah, like right here. Let's just take a quick little listen to Chris's voice from back then.
Let me see, $150.
Wait, that's not a decimal, that's a comma. Hey, move your thumb, Dad.
Like that, it's funny how it's like, it's obviously still Seth MacFarlane, but from there, like, it's kind of wild to hear, like, oh, that's what they want to do with Chris's voice. Ugh. Like, what did you think? Like, should Seth MacFarlane have stayed as Chris's voice there?
Yeah, I think they definitely made the right move, and getting in Seth Green, and they probably didn't expect someone to do, Buffalo Bill impression, but that clearly clicked for the character. And the voice that MacFarlane does as Chris there, it's kind of leaked into other, parts of, Family Guy. You can still hear that voice here and there in other characters, but yeah, the great thing about, Seth MacFarlane, the characters that he would ultimately end up voicing, is that they never sound like the same person. Like, I was amazed when I first learned that Peter Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Stewie Griffin, and Brian Griffin were all from the same guy. But if you told me that if he did the original voice of Chris too, I'd definitely be like, yeah, that's definitely just the same guy, just slightly changing the voice. So it's definitely a good call that they brought someone else in there, and they also brought in several others.
Yeah, I will say Seth MacFarlane is an extremely talented voice actor. Like, there's no denying there. And especially the versatility that he presented in Family Guy is a great example of that. But his role as Chris, like, nah, like, it would fit another character. But this one is like, nah, we could tell it's you again, dude. But speaking of voices, also, another thing that was very fascinating to see is also with Lois. And especially, like, yeah, it's always been Alex Borstein. But at the same time, though, it's kind of, like, interesting to see how Lois was very subdued back then. Like, she's very, like, compared to how Lois is nowadays, like, she's very much down to earth. And that, like, and this still continued on, like, in the first season, like, where Lois is, like, a lot more calm, and her voice, it wasn't as nasally as it was here.
Yeah, it used to be a lot slower like this, and then as it went on, it went more and more like this, more energized. And that's also kind of when the character started to come more into her own, because ever she is kind of just a very subdued wife, and in the original pilot, they even cut out an entire subplot that she would have, in, the ultimate pilot, with her learning that Peter's been lying to her. So they would give her more agency as the series went on, and at this point, I don't think they've really quite figured out who Lois is, and I think the same could be said about Meg and also Chris and even Brian, who doesn't get as many lines here, because a lot of them, went to Chris in this version.
Yeah, like, it is true. Like, back then, Lois was kind of like a Marge Simpson clone, but then over time, like, they did give her own personality. And I guess that is true. Like, I mean, I get it. Like, not all the characters have, like, their prominent time to shine. Like, with, like, yeah, Meg and Brian, they have mostly been sidelined. And, like, even Chris is, like, maybe they developed Chris, like, to be a bit more like a rebel per se, but not much. But then, speaking of personalities, though, like, one of the weirdest things is actually seeing Stewie as the evil genius. Because, like, okay, like, I know it's kind of crazy to say, because, like, yeah, like, one of the popular traits of Stewie is how, like, he is that evil genius. But nowadays, like, he's more of this flamboyant personality. But I think it's like, it only was like a few years that they focus on Stewie being purely this evil genius who wants to exterminate Lois. Like, that was like the only thing that he was, that was the only thing that was about him. That was like his one legit trait. And seeing this here, like, revisiting like the old Family Guy. Like it kind of like sprung this weird memory. I was like, oh yeah, Stewie was like that. Like even during the time when I was watching it, like they kind of gave up halfway through. And some people have even mentioned that apparently like Stewie stopped being evil after the 2007 writer's strike. What did you think about like seeing Stewie being that evil again?
You know what? Yeah, because for the first season, that was pretty much the only note he had. And I will say that of all the characters in the pilot, Stewie is probably the closest to anyone else to representing who he would become in the pilot, because they do seem to have some idea about what to do with him. The thing is that even though, it might be controversial to say, I don't know how much you can really do with Stewie if he had just remained, a diabolical genius. Because, it's kind of like Pinky and the Brain, where sure, they try to take over the world in every episode, but if you really watch every episode, you find that leads to a lot of different things, to the point where, like, are you still trying to take over the world? Because, they keep trying different things with those characters. So I do think that it was probably wise for them to move Stewie in a more direction. But, yeah, going back, just seeing the old school Stewie, it is, kind of surreal just seeing how far the character has come and where he started from.
Yeah, I think it's honestly the right move where they kind of gave that closure to that side of him, because I remember like back when I was watching, they did this whole like a big deal where they did like a special where Stewie actually did kill Lois, or there was this alternate timeline where Stewie successfully killed Lois and like victory was legitimately his. But then like, they had that going on, and then suddenly it was official, and suddenly it turns out to be this weird simulation. And then they officially retired the evil Stewie, and now we got the flamboyant Stewie. So yeah, like it was interesting to see. Also, it is also worth mentioning, by the way, about the whole pilot itself, is the fact that it was made on a micro budget. The factor that Seth MacFarlane, like when Seth MacFarlane pitched this, or hold on a sec, there is a little bit of a story. I believe the AV Club actually said, let's see here. Yeah, the full version of the 5,000. I don't know if they actually said the whole story, but the thing is that Seth MacFarlane was only given $50,000 in order to go and create this pilot. And I gotta say that, yeah, the budget did show, because in terms of the animation, yeah, it's one thing for the designs to be different, but I can't help but think that they really gave this movie, or not a movie, but they gave this pilot this very Hanna-Barbera-like look. Like, what do you think about the animation?
Yeah, it's not surprising seeing how MacFarlane was technically starting at Hanna-Barbera when he was working on shows like Dexter's Lab and Johnny Bravo. And it definitely shows that it was only about 50,000 point proof of concept. And it's ironic that Peter actually gets more in his welfare check than Seth MacFarlane got as an entire thing. It actually might have been a better in-joke if Peter just got $50,000 a week. But, maybe they just weren't considering that. But, yeah, it shows that they were working with what they had.
Yeah, it's true. And there are some times, I gotta say, with the animation, like, it is noticeable how the budget is, like, so low. Like, one scene that really stood out is when all the guys were watching, like, they were trying to watch a porno, but it turns out to be, like, something that got taped over. And that suddenly, like, they want to try to make a plan in order to work with it, and that's when you see the animation getting at its cheapest. Like, here's an example.
We're gonna drink till she's hot.
Hey, that's just crazy enough to work.
I just love how, like, quickly they just went from, like, just standing there and then suddenly, like, just suddenly taking their drink immediately. And that's another thing, by the way, that it shows the budget, like, considering that it is Seth MacFarlane doing, like, a lot of the voices, like a lot of the side characters, along with Peter, Stewie, Brian, Chris, and a prototype of Quagmire. And I think he also did the old boss as well. he did the great majority of the voices, but and maybe this is just the voice actor side of me, so I definitely have grown an ear for this, but Seth was not in a professional recording studio when doing those voices. Like, you could hear the echo prominently displayed throughout the entire episode.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, the early South Park when they did, Santa versus Jesus, where the voices don't sound quite right either. Not just, the sound of the voices, but just the way they're recorded. You can tell it's not really in a professional, setting that they're doing it. They're just, working with whatever little resources they have at their disposal for what limited funds they have. It definitely has that feel to it.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and I'm not necessarily saying that as a bad thing. Again, I am very aware that it only has a $50,000 budget, but still, it just adds to the weird trippy experience of seeing Family Guy like this. So overall, I gotta say that this is definitely quite a find, and a great find, by the way, of getting the full original pilot. But I will say it was such a strange experience just revisiting not just Family Guy, but the old Family Guy, and especially seeing it in a way that what it used to be, with alternate colors for their costumes, with the different voices that they would go and use. It was strange to see what Family Guy used to be, as well as Family Guy on a massive budget. It almost felt like someone was asked to go and recreate the first episode of Family Guy from memory. That's the feeling that I got from all this. So it was, definitely a great find, but it was a strange experience seeing what they've done, seeing what they've done here.
Especially without the Kool-Aid guy. How could they not have him in the original?
Yeah, that is true. That's the one thing. Yeah, that's often the biggest criticism I've seen people actually say. Where is it? Just want to go and just try to let's see where.
Right there in the trial scene.
Yeah, on the trial.
Yeah.
Where is it? Yeah, I think right here.
More than me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they're saying, oh no,
Oh, no.
Oh, there it is.
Oh no.
Oh, no.
Oh no.
Oh no.
I love how, okay, I remember now. The old boss is Mr. Weed. I love how there's a delay. It's just, oh no, and then immediately cut him out. But yeah, it is very strange they did that without the Kool-Aid Man.
Maybe they didn't have the budget. Or
yeah,
maybe they weren't sure if they could get the rights. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's more of a rights issue because, they did do a reference of stuff like the Brady Bunch and Tom Hanks's stuff, but they could get away with that. But it's specifically the imagery of the Kool-Aid Man. Yeah, that I think they got to go and have to pay up something. All right, so with that said, now I would like to go and pass this on to the chat wall, and I'd like to ask you all, what did you think of the discovery of the full lost pilot of Family Guy? Did you actually watch the pilot? Did you not? And if so, what did you think of it? I would love to know your thoughts on that. Let's see now. I'll admit, I'm not really a big Family Guy fan. This is still a major discovery, seeing how different the pilot is compared to the original series. It is fascinating, and it's definitely a big discovery. Also, speaking of lost media, I have to ask you, Nick, did you see the trailer of the canceled live-action Powerpuff Girls series that was found not too long ago?
Yes, I did, and pretty much everything that's been said about it is true. I guess I won't add more negativity to it, but I will just say two things. Number one, I'm glad that Tom Kenny got paid because I'm pretty sure that's his voice in the trailer.
Yeah,
and
it is.
two, I'm glad Dove Cameron is still working because she's really underappreciated in Schmigadoon.
Fair enough. They got something. Again, as an actor, I do understand how it sucks when something, when a project that you've worked weeks on doesn't go through. But still, though, considering the project it is, it's for the best.
Yeah, better to cut your losses at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. The pilot is wild yet fascinating. Okay. I never really had much of a relationship with Family Guy, adult shows. Not really a fan of. I have seen some episodes when I was younger without my parents' restraints, and I will admit that they're pretty funny. I think they were way too dependent on pop culture gags, not to mention the extremeness, not my cup of tea. I will give credit that it did give a starting point to other famous creators like Dan Povenmire and Butch Hartman. It's not for me, but still fascinating in itself. All right. My life is like multiple Family Guy cutaway gags. Say Peter, do you remember the time that Lois had blonde hair and Chris had a different voice? Also, this would have been Cleveland's first appearance as well, and his voice is white as ever in this. So yeah, it's an interesting find. As a Family Guy stan, it's absolutely fascinating. Oh, that's true. They did have Cleveland in this. It was just a short moment after like Meg touched the thermostat. Just want to go and like quickly double check. Was it like at the beginning? Oh, yeah. It's like right over here. Like right over. Yeah. Like.
And how does he always know?
Brain implant, Meg. Every father's got one. Tells you when the children are messing with the dial.
Hey, Peter, my thing went off. Your thermostat okay?
Yeah, it's all right.
Hey, is my kid over here?
Forget it. False alarm.
Yeah, there he is. There's Cleveland. Oh yeah, and they gave him a much whiter voice than the previous one. Oh boy. Yeah. And it's also very interesting to see like who would be Peter's friends in the future, especially with that, like with what I mentioned before, the prototype Quagmire. That was also another weird, like that was another thing that was like additionally strange. Like, yeah, this guy right over here that, it's like a much more subdued design compared to what we have now. Oh boy. All right. I think we got one more comment that we could go and check out. Let's see. Chumbawamba Goobly Goo, we got some Lost Pilot only for you. I really enjoyed the pilot, especially the part where Stewie hypnotizing the judge before Peter went to jail for years. This is such a true sight to behold to see the original pilot being found. Though it was a shame that I didn't see the Kool-Aid Man appearing in the pilot, but I guess it is what it is. Also, fun little quiz. What is your favorite Family Guy character minus Stewie? That is a good question. Honestly, I haven't really thought about that. I mean, maybe Stewie after he moved on from the whole like evil genius thing, but yeah, either Peter or Stewie. What about you?
It would probably be Peter or Quagmire, or I'll show some love to Greased Up Deaf Guy.
Oh my god, the Greased Up Deaf Guy. I forgot about him. Yeah, I would honestly, it's been such a long time. Honestly, I haven't thought about it. I would just need a bit of a refresher of like all the people in Quahog to like make sure that if I could point out to one that I really do like. But yeah, again, it's been such a long time since I've thought about Family Guy that honestly, I kind of forgot about like many of the other characters. I'm sure that I do have more than just Peter and Stewie. All right. Actually, there is one extra one I want to go, or maybe two. Actually, we do have time for two. Hold on. The fact that the lost pilot of Family Guy is in its full was discovered was an interesting case of lost media being found. It puts everything about the show in retrospect and shows how far the show has come to see what worked and what didn't work about the show at first. The pilot was way different than the Death Has a Shadow version. Thank you. Unrelated, but did you know that The Day the Earth Blew Up had two Disney animators credited like John Pomeroy and Tony Bancroft? Oh, that's nice. All right, here's the last one. Okay. When I watched this for the first time, it was surreal. It's kind of passable. It is more of a proof of concept, but I'll give it this. It's a neat find. But even with a $50,000 budget, it looks really dirty, honestly. And not in that way. Get your mind out of the gutter. All right, so I think with that said, though, that should do it for this episode of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast. Nick, thank you so much for joining me on this. And by the way, if anybody wants to go and follow you, or if they want to see more of what you do on the internet, where can we go and find you?
Yeah, you can find me on pretty much all social media platforms as Nick Spake or as Cartoon Contender. And within the next week, I'm launching a site for my book, Bright and Shiny, at cartooncontender.com, where I'll also be updating with more animation and award show related news. So look for me there.
All right, awesome to hear. And if you want to go and follow more of AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast, then all you have to do is go to subscribe to the AniMat Live Twitch channel and also the AniMat's Crazy Cartoon Cast YouTube channel. But at the same time, if you are following me on whatever podcast service you're listening to, then, don't forget to go and follow me there as well. Make sure that it is officially followed, rather it be on Spotify, Amazon, or on Apple or anything like that. So with that said and done, I would like to say thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for watching. And Nick, thank you so much for joining me on this again. And until next time, folks, see you later, dudes.